this author as much as the other ones. We've had some great ones on. But we have Christina Chiu here, who's the author of Beauty, which you can see in my background, and if you can, in my, so she's written a fabulous book. I mean, it's your first novel, but you've written a collection of short stories too. So, and I'm gonna, well, I'm supposed to read. I want to read about your background because you have a fascinating background. This book has won so many awards and it's gotten such great comments and reviews. And you got your MFA from Columbia, and you have, I mean, I'm just looking at all the awards you've won, so just too many to mention. So anyway, but yeah. So can we start? Well, welcome, Christina.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited for you. This is so much energy around your book, and I thought maybe we'd start off. Could you maybe read something from your book? You want to start off that way?
Sure. Sure, I will. I just want to say thank you for joining me. I mean, it's so nice to see people that, like, you know, when you're writing, you just have no idea if anyone actually cares.
Yeah, look at they do.
You know, and then when you see people, you're like, wow, people really do care. They like it, you know, and it's such a great feeling.
And as you're finding your spot, I want to just tell people how we're going to do it is I'm going to talk to Christina at the beginning, and you can be writing your questions or comments in the chat, and then I will call on you to when we start opening up for questions, where you can ask your question directly to Christina if you want, or if you don't want, if you want to still be, you know, if you're a little shy, I can ask it for you. So anyway, so Christina, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Good.
So I often get this question, which is, which part of you is in the book? Like, are you writing about yourself? And I always tell people, no, it's fiction. You know, it's definitely not me. But one of the things that I wanted to say was that you know, of course, every writer takes something from their own lives, right? And so for me, about 10 years ago, my grandmother passed away, and the funeral was so life-changing for me that I knew I would end up writing about it at some point. I didn't know how. And then when I started working on this book, it just kind of crept in and happened. And I think what was really incredible was that my experience in real life was so changed after the funeral, that when I approached this work, it really came out in this beautiful way that I didn't expect. You know, because you're not writing about yourself, you're writing about the situation, right? It's all about the story. And it just came out in a way that I felt was so beautiful, and I really loved it. So I'm going to read from that chapter. It's a later chapter in the book. It's called A Closet into Eternity. And thank you for being here. A Closet into Eternity. The casket. It's sparkly copper with a silver trim. The top's open, revealing a shiny, off-white interior. Over the bottom half rests a spray of white lilies, wreaths of white chrysanthemums, tulips, and mums, each on a self-standing easel, and red sash naming the family it's from line the four walls. From where I stand at the back entrance of the room, behind the rows of folding chairs, there's no view of the body at all. The wake doesn't start for another hour, and yet the room is occupied with at least 40 people, mostly older, either seated in the guest area, milling about, or talking in hushed tones. Maybe it's the jet lag, but everyone seems distant and muted. Their shapes seem almost fuzzy, as if I'm looking through a dense fog. So I'm gonna just take a brief pause here and explain something. So the main character is at a point in her life where she has not seen her father since she was 16, and now she's in her 40s. And the reason why she hasn't seen him is because he ended up having an affair and then ended up marrying this other person who lives there in China. And so it was kind of traumatic for this character. And a lot of the book really deals with, I think I told Jeannie before, I was a religion major during college, and I studied religion and in particular Buddhism. And so karma for me has been a real, a way of life. Like I look through everything through this filter. So I'm gonna mention the wife. Which one is she? I've never met her or the son, nor have I seen photos. Ma once said she wasn't pretty, just young, only a year or two older than Georgie, but I never believed her. For Dad to leave, either the woman had to be spectacularly beautiful or Dad had to have hated us that much. And the son? He's here too somewhere. You're late, Ma says in a low voice appearing from the muddle. She's wearing the black pleated Jeff Jones skirt I got her from work. It was my birthday gift to her last year. I didn't make the earlier flight, I say. I couldn't leave until after the presentation. New designs, she asks. She's thrilled about my new recent promotion to executive creative director. She smooths her fingers over her skirt. No numbers, I say. Corporate wants to cut back again. That looks good on you. Pretty, huh? The people closest to us turn and stare. I have never seen any of these people before, and yet I get the feeling they all know who I am. I eye a 60-ish-year-old woman with heavy makeup, blown out hair, and long, immaculate lash extensions. She's older than I, but not by much, maybe 5 or 6 years. Could it be her? Quick, Ma orders. Go see your father. We're starting soon. Wait. I noticed Georgie in the far corner of the room, deep in conversation with a slender, 6-foot Chinese gentleman. He hands her a pen and tome of papers, points to the page as if indicating where he'd like her to sign. Attorney? No, can't be. Even from where I'm standing, I can tell he's wearing a handsome suit, not conservative enough on one hand, and much too lovely on the other for the typical attorney. Then again, this is Hong Kong. Ma says people here take better care in how they dress. Who's that hot? I start to ask, but Ma's attention is elsewhere. Something over my shoulder. Nearsightedness forces her to squint. I glance around to see an older man with thinning hair. Her cheeks flush. She returns the gesture. Who's he? I ask. Uncle, she says. Uncle as in blood relative? I smirk. Or uncle as in one of Dad's friends and you're actually flirting at his funeral? Son-in-law? What happened? Ma asks. A person shouldn't have manners? No, really, Ma, I laugh. Who are all these people? Ma surveys the gathering. Family. Family, I say. I've yearned for family for how many years? And she's telling me now that all these people I never knew about were part of it? Yeah, Ma mutters, shaking her head. Tada, hers. Ma searches the room and not finding her says, you know who. I thought this thing wasn't starting for another hour, I say. For outside people, Ma says. She rolls my carry-on suitcase, then nudges me toward the front of the room. Now go. I pause. In my mind, I've had this idea about the moment I first see Dad. There's a possibility that I'll come to some kind of realization about my life, or his, or perhaps the one we shared and then not shared. I might sob in front of everyone. On one hand, crying's proof I care. It's a declaration that love existed, that I matter, and yet I don't want a spectacle, not in front of strangers, and especially not in front of her and the son. there's the part of me that doesn't want to give them the benefit of knowing I care at all. And as much love and compassion as I've tried to cultivate as a newfound Buddhist, it doesn't actually extend to them. I hate them. I've never hated anyone more. The Buddha taught that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And yet I gulp it down like nectar. Should I keep reading?
No, that's great. That's great. Because I just want to make, if we have time, we'll get a little bit more, but I know people, I mean, I have so many questions. So I love that quote about poison. Is that really, that's a real quote?
Yes.
Brilliant. I mean, yeah, well, that's how it goes. So that was great. If we could all clap, we would. And for people who just came in, was just going to type this, but write your questions or comments in the chat and we'll get to you so you can talk to Christina directly and ask your questions, because we like this to be interactive. So Christina, you told me you've worked on this book for 14 years. So let's start with that. What, I know you had an MFA. Did it grow out of a short story, or how did it germinate?
So my first book was a collection of short stories called Troublemaker and Other Saints. And one of the stories was called Beauty. And after I finished Troublemaker, I started another novel. And for some reason, it just didn't go anywhere. It was like, it had like no energy in it. It was like lifeless. And I kept like trying to work it so that it would happen. But really what was happening was it was like this little voice on my shoulder was like, you need to write about me. You know, it's like, and it was Amy, and she's from one of the short stories, and she kind of, instead of being diminished, she kind of kept growing on me until she was constantly there. I had to literally put the other book aside, and I'm glad I did, because it was terrible. And I started working on this one. But then the structure of this book is really different than what I had imagined. You know, I was writing the typical story where, you know, today this happens, and then tomorrow this happens, and next month whatever, right? But but at a certain point, I realized I was going in circles for a little while, and then I realized after I took some time off that, this isn't her story. It's the moments in her path, like for her personal growth and self-realization. So once I realized that these were karmic moments, I started to see these little episodic moments as being almost like separate short stories. And then I actually started being able to write, but it took many years for me to figure that one out. Some people are slow learners. I happen to be one of them. So it took me like a while to figure it out, but then once I figured it out, it took me about 2 years to write, and then another 2 years to kind of edit and get it into shape.
And so, yeah, I think that's one of the distinctive characteristics of the book is the big jumps in time. And I think at first, maybe the first time there's a jump, it might be a little jarring, but I think that everything you need to know kind of comes out of how the gap was spent, and so it really is, it's very efficient, I think, and effective.
So like a few years ago, I had a near-death experience. So I had gone to see this allergist, and she gave me a shot for, you know, so that, you know, it was an allergy shot. And then of course I had a reaction, and I ended up in the hospital.
Wow.
And after that reaction, it made me see things like, okay, so at the moment of my death, which are the moments that are going to come back to me?
Wow.
And that's when I started to figure out her path and the moments I was going to choose.
Wow. Okay. That's so So were you actually, when you were in the hospital, were you thinking of your own life kind of like that?
So yeah, so it was kind of strange, right? Because my throat was closing up and I was gagging, and my eyes were like tearing, and the the resident, who's like usually in the middle island, you know, he stays in there, but he came right up to my area and was like walking, marching side to side, and then he came up to my table where I was sitting, and he literally, I swear to God, this is crazy, but he literally thought, oh, she's not going to make it.
Wow.
And, and it was like the words like in his mind came over and I heard them, and literally I was like, holy shit. I'm like, oh, he thinks I'm not going to make it. Holy shit, he thinks I'm not going to make it. You know, like I'm not going to make it, like that. So it was totally like crazy, but one of the, I have to say, it was one of the best moments in my life because it made me see life really differently.
Wow, what a great story. My God. I mean, talk about a silver lining. You almost die, but you got this new perspective and the kind of the format for your novel.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I figure if you're almost about to die, you should get something from it.
That's right.
That's the rule.
That's the rule. I'll remember that. So it seems to me that it'd be a challenge to, as you know, jump time to make sure that her characteristics, the characteristics of the protagonist, that her voice stays enough the same, but then she would have grown, so there'd be some differences. So did you struggle with that part?
I didn't so much because she had been living with me for so many years that I literally could hear her speaking.
Wow.
I could hear her. Like when I would type, you know, it would be her speaking. I would just try to catch the dialogue quickly enough.
That's,
You know?
that's amazing closeness with your character. I mean, just she's dictating the book to you, not you know what I mean, but she's kind of like, that's nice. Well, we're going to get into some more of the story itself and how you wrote it, but I'm very fascinated with you won this big award, the
James Allen McPherson.
yes, and I just thought it'd be interesting to tell people about that and how that impacted you to win that.
Okay, so there's so much I want to say about the James Allen McPherson, because he was the first Black man to win the Pulitzer.
Oh, okay.
And not only did he win the Pulitzer, but he taught at Iowa, and he literally helped so many people of color make it. Uh, they wouldn't be here, these writers, if it weren't for him. He really made sure, and he gave them the help that they needed, the support, and like authors like Christian.
Oh, Mark, hold on, I'm going to mute something. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So what happened was my agent was not able to sell my manuscript. And I wasn't totally surprised because beauty is not your typical story. So I had it for a little while. And at one point I heard that Gishchen was, she was judging this contest. And then I looked up the name of James, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So I sent it because I really admired Gish's work, and she ended up choosing it.
Wow.
So it won the award, and then it ended up getting published.
Is that part of the award? Is it when you win the award, you get a book deal? Is that part of it?
You get a book deal if you choose. You don't have to do it, but I just decided I would do it because it was a multicultural press, and I felt like it was right that this book came from a multicultural press because it's very different in that I often feel that some of the mainstream publishers publish what they want to hear
Mm-hmm.
versus what people are actually writing. or want to write. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, I didn't want beauty to be changed. I wanted it like the way it is. And so I published with them, and it came out.
And it came out in just like a month ago or so, right? Or earlier
Yep,
this month,
May 1st.
May 1st. So speaking about the multicultural part, what is it that you, as an Asian woman, Asian American woman, what is it that you want the reader to take, to learn about that, or to absorb about that, that's not being said in all these books by, you know, mainstream writers?
Well, I think that there are different things that I hope people come away with. One of the things that matters to me is the intersectionality aspect of the book, and that you know, we talk about beauty as like it's like currency, right? You're young, you're beautiful, right? You have power, right? But for Asian American women, that's not necessarily the case. It can be really bad in some ways, and part of it is because of a lot of the stereotypes that exist. And so the when race and gender kind of meet, it can create this kind of prism of like ideas that don't actually exist. Like, you know, everyone's heard of like the exotic Asian woman, right? Like, you know, the docile, quiet, you know, Asian woman. And I'm so not like that. So, so people are always like, you know, kind of shocked. But yeah, so I think that aspect is really important. Another aspect for me that is very important is I see, and I've experienced this too as a mom, as a woman. You know, you put everyone else first, right? You need to take care of your children. You need to, you know, take care of your family. And something comes up, you have to put your stuff down and you have to deal with it, right? And I feel like along the way, a lot of women give up. And so if there's any one thing I want people to walk away with is knowing that you can do it, whatever that it is, that you can reach and get where you want to go, and that people will help you. I mean, a perfect example for me is Fran. Fran is on with us tonight, and you know, I reached out to her. I didn't even know her. And I said, Fran, I know you from, you know, Walter, and I really need help. And she's been helping me. And I think that when people realize that people are willing to help and people do care, like, you know, I have a friend on, Christina, right now, and my friend Jolie, friends from all over. And it's such a great feeling. Like you don't realize that people care as much as they do, and that they'll help you. And so for me, that's a big part of this. Knowing that you know, whatever it is that you are hoping for and dreaming about, reach, stretch, and don't stop stretching
Well,
until you get.
and I guess what's important about what you're saying is that it's not necessarily going to happen when you think it's going to happen or how you think it's going to happen, but Amy is in it for the long. It's the long game, right? And I think that's the kind of what is inspiring. Is okay. She had a lot of roadblocks along the way, and
Lot.
yeah, but she didn't give up. So I think that, so I see what you're saying there.
And I think that sometimes we forget that actually, you know, we strive for whatever it is and we're like, oh, I'll never get it, so I don't want to do it. But oftentimes it's the journey itself that becomes really rewarding. And you have a sense of pride and happiness that you've been trying, right? Like that you've taken these steps and you feel good about yourself. But like, it's when you start to shrink into yourself and start to give up, that's when you start to feel miserable. And I think with Amy, that's really the case. I'm talking about her like she's real, but yeah. So
okay, we feel it. So, um, and so I'm just curious too about the, you know, this book, it could have been written about any young woman, but it's I mean, as far as like striving and having roadblocks, but I just like to think about the expectations of her mother being a pretty powerful, and that those might be different in Asian culture than, is that right?
well, I think I think Chinese mothers have been compared a little bit to Jewish moms, and it's because there's always there's the education aspect, right? Like they're expecting doctors and lawyers out of all the kids, and and they want certain things, and they can be really domineering and just get in your face a little bit. But in this case, it's so funny because initially when I started writing it, I was like, God, I cannot stand this mother. But I actually really love her, and I had so much empathy for her by the end. I really felt for her, and it was really gratifying to see that shift.
That, and why do you think that is? Just because you could have understood her more? Her
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of it was, when you're younger, you don't understand. You think, oh, if you're not happy, why don't you just leave? Right? Like, and you'll hear people say that she's miserable, she should just leave. But it's not that actually easy. It's like you have a kid who's really difficult, or special needs, or whatever. Financially, what are you going to do? Just walk out? Like,
right.
It's actually not that easy. And so I think once I started working on this book and saw the arc of not only Amy's life, but her mother's life, my empathy for her really, like, I mean, I just loved her. She just became this beautiful person. I mean, she has this moment, and I didn't get a chance to read this part because it's in the funeral scene too. But so they end up seeing the second wife, right? And so the second wife is at this point like, he's run her through the like ringer. I mean, he's like made her old, like, so the mom here, she's like, oh, well, there's karma for you, because I actually still look good, and he looks like a wreck because he wrecked her. He was like hell to be with, and realizing that for her and for me was so gratifying, like, because she was thinking of her life in terms of losses, but at that moment she's like, holy mackerel, I lucked out. I saved myself. I got out.
Yeah.
And that was so yummy. What a yummy moment.
I know, I loved it. And I get that the mother was extremely beautiful in her day. Hold on, I've got something coming. I'm keeping everyone muted until I call on you if you want to have a discussion. That's why I keep going in and muting people. If you wonder why. So actually, speaking of that, we do have a question from Christina. Christina, I'm gonna unmute you so you can ask it yourself, which is the joy of this Zoom business.
Great, thank you. So Christina, as we talked about the fact that I'm working on a novel as well, and I would love your advice and your thoughts on how to navigate the messiness of it. I mean, it has taken over not only my study, but my dining room. It's really messy. How do you navigate
you mean the physical messiness, not just the messiness in your...
Oh, all of it.
Well, I think that's just part of it, because you need to kind of spread out a little bit, right? Because a novel isn't like a short story where you can kind of see all the episodes in like one little strip, right? You have, you know, you might have an epic story, I mean, that wanders here, wanders there, and you're not actually sure initially which parts you're going to edit out and which parts are absolutely fundamental to the story. I mean, some people do know that. I'm not one of these people. Like I said, I'm a pretty slow learner. So when it comes to that, it takes me a long time to figure things out. So I don't want to throw anything away. So I have piles just like all over, which makes it really, really bad because we live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and I literally have taken over our kitchen table. So we don't have a place to eat at this point. So, but I do think that that's great that if you have the space, you should use it, because you're mapping things out without realizing it. You're kind of mapping things out, and after a while you'll start moving things around once things start to make better sense. You know?
Yeah,
What do you
it
think?
just seems so hard to keep track of everything because, as you say, you can't see it.
I think you need one of those boards like in A Beautiful Mind, where you have those strings going all around, connecting.
I mean, I think what really helps is, so I'm one of these pilers, right? So if I write something and I have friends look at it, and I'll get like edits back, right? So then I keep it in a little pile. And then the next time I get more stuff, I just put it all into the same pile, because, you know, it doesn't actually matter, right? I'm not actually looking for it at that point. So then I end up literally the novel when I was working on it was literally, the pile was up to here. Like, it was really high. And then when I got to the point where I actually like understood the arc of the story, then I started to go through the section, like each section, and I'm like, oh yes, this might be here, this might be here, this might be here, right? And then you can figure out which parts go where. But, you know, just trust that it will happen, because it will. It's usually pretty organic, and like has its own little stubborn way about it, I'm sure, but it'll get there. I mean, I think writing can be so frustrating that way. You can't force it, right? So just let it lead the way.
Let it lead the way. And Fran has a question. I want Fran to ask this. I'm trying to unmute you, Fran.
I'm unmuting.
Oops.
I wrote that, or I'm asking, in Beauty, you present your main character's life. You know, we start with her as a teenager, and then we go through young adulthood, and then there's marriage and motherhood. And I won't divulge, for those who haven't read the book, what kind of happens to that marriage. And then we're in middle age, and then we're even in senior years, right? 60s and 70s. And I guess I wanted to know, was there a decade in Amy Wong's story, Amy being the main character, that you feel would resonate the most with your readers?
I think different sections will resonate with different people, and part of the issue is that this is like, I think there's a temptation to say, oh, this is a woman's book, which I think, you know, that's true. It's a woman's book. There are sections that really deal with women's issues, what it's like to be a mom, what it's like to kind of let your career slip away, you know, the frustrations of dealing with a child who's difficult, or a husband who doesn't actually listen to you, all of that, right? But I was just thinking about this today. It's so funny. I was thinking, you know who would benefit the most from reading this book? Men. No, really. I actually mean it. I think that if men read this book, they would actually understand that they've had a lot of things wrong. And they would realize, oh, wow, I have been doing X, Y, or Z, and I didn't realize that this is actually kind of not great to be doing. And I actually had an ex-boyfriend read Beauty, and he was, bless his soul, I tell you, he was so amazing, because he said to me thank you so much for letting me read this book, because I went and apologized to this woman who I
Oh my,
yeah, he's like, I had no idea that I was basically encroaching on her space. It wasn't until I read this book and I realized, oh God, like as a white male, like I have actually thought like everything is like kind of mine, right? Like, you know, the whole Jeff Jones, like she marries this man named Jeff Jones, who's this fashion giant. And the problem with that is that, you know, with the Jeff Joneses in the world, they don't necessarily comprehend what it's actually like to be just a regular person or have other kinds of issues that, you know, all he can see is him. It's all, you know, I mean, I think our America's tends to be a little bit narcissistic, right? Because we all want to be individuals. We all, it's all about me. It's how I am. And now we have a president who epitomizes narcissism to the extreme. And we kind of wonder, well, how did we get here, right? But part of that is because we don't pay attention to ourselves and like as a group, as a community. And you know, there's so many women who have helped me with this book, and it made me realize, like, you know, we need to help each other. Like, you know, when women don't help each other, and I think this is what Next Tribe is about, which is what makes it so darn awesome. It's like, without each other, we're struggling just alone.
Right.
Right? And there's no point in that, because we could help each other get so far. And I feel like, you know, this whole COVID thing, you know, yes, it was not so great that I ended up having to launch my book during COVID. Not a great feeling. However, it's given me the opportunity to help other people. And that has been a gift. It feels really good to be able to help other people and to do it in a way that that makes me feel like I'm good at what I do. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's beautiful. Yes. And we should probably say that you did write an essay for us about you making the masks and making them with personality. And I love that essay because it brought in so much about your personal history and tied it into what was going on today, which leads me to, we could talk about that essay all day, but let's stick with the book. What I find fascinating is that you actually became a shoe designer while you were researching the book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Talk about that. That's so neat.
Yeah, I did all kinds of research for this book. I read about trauma, I read about religion, I like did all kinds of research. And then at a certain point, I needed to understand the actual tactile reasons that people get drawn to the field of fashion, and what it is about it that makes, you know, as a literary person, I've always been kind of snooty. I didn't realize I was being snooty. I always thought, like, oh, you know, we're so smart, we're so literary. Those people kind of shout. It wasn't until I started actually making things and making shoes that I realized this is like an art form. It's visual art. You know, I started to read about different designers who, listen, they were doing things, you know, we think that we're such trendsetters now with being, you know, wearing clothes that are, you know, comfortable or whatever. There were designers who were doing this 20 years ago. You know, Comme des Garçons is a perfect example. Like, you know, who knew, right? So the more research I did, the more I fell in love with fashion, and the more I started to try different things. And once I started shoemaking, oh, man, it's like an addiction. I cannot stop. I love making shoes. And what I also love doing is making shoes for people that I care about. So I do that too. And I've been working on a series of shoes actually for an installation that I will hopefully have. It's coming along really slowly, so maybe in 10 years, but an installation of boots for women who are in the literary world who I feel are making a real difference. And it's going to be called Stand.
Stand. Okay. And I like how you're thinking like 10 years. Yeah, I'm hanging in there. I'm going to be doing it. I'm not put off by the thinking about long term. I love that.
Well, I think like, it's like you do one thing at a time, like, just if you just focus on the little, like, I think that's the one thing I've learned from shoemaking and the process of shoemaking, that you don't jump to the end, right? When writers are often do that, they're like, well, why can't I just like be done already, right? Like, and it seems like you can do that, but no, actually, if you had the visual form of writing, you would see that there are actually 10 million steps between where you are and a novel that's printed and done. So until you have that, you realize that there's that visual, you can feel really frustrated, and you want to have things hurry up, like, be quicker or whatever. But that's not the process. I mean, some people can write really quickly. So like, don't take 14 years to write your book is what I'm saying. That is definitely not, I don't advise that. But if it does take you longer, then it just takes you longer. And it's a little bit like making art. If you're, some painters work on their paintings for many, many years, decades. And that's not unusual for them, because it's the process.
Nice. Well, we have Jolie's asking a question sort of about process, so I'm going to unmute Jolie. Hi.
Hi. It's really neat to talk to you this way. So Christina, I have admired both of your books so much, and a lot of what is so fascinating is your style. And in Troublemaker and Other Saints, even though it wasn't a novel, you had a way of tying all these short stories together, and it was very interesting, like how it was going to come together. You could see little pieces of another story and that sort of thing. And then when now that Beauty is here, you're finding another, really interesting way, as everybody's been mentioning, going through the decades. And I just love the art of how you've done that. And I wonder, do you have those different styles in mind before you go into the book? Or are you just writing and then these like creative techniques come to you as you're writing the story? Will you always be mixing it up this way? I mean, that's probably a silly question, but it's very, I like your, I just really like the way you go about telling these stories, and you have these little tricks, and it's neat.
I think it took me many years to figure out the structure of this book, because I didn't understand I didn't understand until much later that the journey was really her karmic journey. And once I understood that, then I could move forward. But until I understood that, I was stuck. So that was really frustrating. But Troublemaker was not about that, but there was a definite feeling of 6 degrees of separation.
Right.
And yeah, it didn't matter where you were on the globe. It didn't matter if you were rich or poor. Like, you could be connected by family, you could be connected by proximity, you could be connected, so I love, like, so one of the things that happened to me after 9/11 was I was in the Strand, and there are 10 million books, right? What's that saying that they have, like 10 million books? They're really proud of it. And writers have this when they teach, they always teach like this. They say, all the stories have been written before, but you know, it's the way you tell it that matters, right? That's what makes a difference. But and now I before I ever say that again, I'm gonna preface that, and I'm gonna say, it's true that everything has been written before, and it's true that no one has the ability to tell the story like you do. But it's also true that if you write a story, it should be meaningful. And that when people walk away, they think about it and that it matters. And that possibly, I mean, I don't presume to think that my book's going to be here in 100 years, but to hope or actually have that aspiration, I think, is important, because why write a story? Look, the Strand, I'm standing in the Strand, there are 10 million books. Like, why add another one? Right? So the whole thing for me was really like, how do I tell the story that matters? And for me to tell this story, what story should I be telling? And what would have an impact on the world around me? And, you know, it was hard because, like, there was that part of me that was like, nobody wants to hear what a Chinese American woman has to say, like, really? But then, you know, that's not my job as the author, right? The author writes what needs to be written, and the voice comes out through that. And so even though I went into it thinking, ugh, maybe no one's gonna take this book, right? I had to be true to the work. And I had to, at times, like, I had to follow the character to places where I really did not like to go. But it really is like an art form, and you can't jip it. You know, it's like, if you get this chance, this opportunity to have some kind of understanding or realization, you should go there, like really go there. I mean, I really feel that. I feel it, and I feel that women in particular need to do this, women writers, because, you know, beauty has sex scenes in it, right? And people are like, wow, there's sex scenes in it. And I'm like, yeah, you know, when Jonathan Franzen writes about sex scenes, which, by the way, are not necessarily even correct, like it makes you wonder if he's actually had sex. You know, like, nobody questions, right? So we have generations of men who have no idea what actually is erotic and what is actually, like, rape, what is actually, you know, like, we just don't. And you know what? We can say, yeah, you don't know, but you know what? We could also let them know. Right. And this is what I mean about men learning a lot from this book, because I think that there's no language that they've had thus far. And part of it is because when men write about sex, it's literature. But when women write about sex, it's eroticism. And for me, that I wanted to nail that little sucker to the wall and be like, no, it is not. This is literature. And no one can get around saying otherwise. And I think that other women need to do this too. Christina and everyone else who's writing. Yeah, I mean, and not just about sexuality or sex, everything.
I haven't, so when you said earlier that this was a different kind of book, you thought this was a different kind of book, did you mean that, or not a typical novel, I think is what you said, did you mean that kind of in the way you handled sex in this? Or, I mean, was that one?
Well, there are many different aspects of the book that are different. The way it's structured, is one. The actual the content, which I think there are parts of it that are, I don't feel like I've seen before, and are uncomfortable. And I think that sometimes people sacrifice writing about because it takes the reader somewhere not comfortable. And so, you know, instead of risking that, they cut out the whole scene altogether, right? And that's just not who we are. We're like sexual beings. And it's, so my whole perspective is really different. And for me, it's more important to actually create a language that people can understand, and to fill in all those little holes that make a painting, right? It's like a little dot painting, right? And the more we do that, the more we create what it is from a woman's point of view. And I think that is, the more women do that, the more we create a stronger voice. And I think the Me Too movement was so fundamental to this change in mind, because I don't think my book would have come out if it had been in fact, it didn't, because my agent was shopping it around before Me Too, and then she couldn't sell it. And then it was after Me Too that I saw the contest happening and I submitted my book. So I think our whole thinking around sexuality and what is okay to write has shifted. In a way, I think that is good. And yes, I do take things to the extreme. I totally admit that. I will push that envelope as far as I can push it. But for me, I figure, you know, I haven't said anything in 14 years, so I may as well just say it and you know, get out there. So that's, you know, what I tried to do.
When you were trying to sell it, your agent was trying to sell it before, were comments coming back about the sex? Was that one of the things that?
No, actually, the comments were varied, and to the point where my agent was like, you know, I don't even want to show you because they're like so different that it just doesn't matter. Like, I don't want you to see these because, you know, there's no particular reason, and they won't give you a reason if they're saying like, look, if your idea of an Asian woman is that she's quiet and that she's docile, and then you read a book that's, of course you're going to be like, no, I don't want that book, right? Like, that's not the book I want to acquire. Right. So it takes so much change, really. And like I said, because of the Me Too movement, and because women were willing to speak about this very important topic, suddenly it was like, oh, this is actually an important book. And what really excited me was that people actually got it. It wasn't like people were saying, oh, she writes about sex, she's just the sex writer, right? They actually understood why I was writing about it and the political ramifications of it all. Like, I was like, wow, like, you know, just, it's so incredible. I feel like I've done the right thing.
Well, great. Well, we think so too. I have we're about out of time, but I will have one question. I was thinking at the end of the book, and we won't give away the end, but do you think that Amy, looking back on her life, does she think it was a good life? I mean, was she happy with her life?
I think Amy would do what most of us would do, and that is to look back and say, holy shit, I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore. And be just psyched that you know, she landed on her feet, and that she actually actively changed her way of thinking to be happy and make make her family, her idea of family shifts, right? And her idea of relationships shift, like so it becomes like very gratifying, because that's life, right? Like, you hear about, people who, are upset with their parents because their parents never listened, or they never blah, 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 blah. But then they have kids and they do the same thing, right? So it's like, what, you're just going to keep passing that along? Like the buck has to stop somewhere, and it may as well be you, right? So you can make all these choices, and that's actually one of the things that I wanted to bring out in the book, and that's that we do make choices, whether or not we realize or not, by not act like, it's like, if you don't do something, you're making a choice, right? We think, we make choices and it's an active decision, right? No. If you just sit on your ass, that's a decision, right? Giving up is a decision. Moving forward, regardless of whatever, it's a decision. The fact of the matter is that everyone has discouragement. It's how you deal with it that matters. Discouragement every day. I mean, I literally, at one point in my life, I have a little guy who was born with a syndrome of birth defects, and he went through 7 surgeries within 2 years. And so we practically lived in the hospital. And I just thought to myself, like, there were points in it when I was like, I would rather die. I really can't do this anymore. I really have nothing left. I can't do this anymore. And, lucky for me, I have friends who just kept me going. And I made it. I got to the other side of it. And, my kid's thriving now and goes to school, but when you're in it, you don't think that far. You feel stuck, right? And that's so natural. You feel stuck. But if you could see yourself 10 years from now or 5 years from now and know that you'd be in a different place, then you would feel better, right? So why not picture that in your mind? Like, why not have that picture in your mind of, like, you being better, or you having the job that you want, or why not? I mean, we always think of all the bad things that can happen to us. Why not think about some good things that could happen to us? I mean, you can choose.
Yes, that's wonderful. And you know what? Amy Wong as a character has a great story, but really, Christina, you yourself have a great story on what you've done to get where you are with this book. And so I celebrate you and congratulate you on such a great book and such a great story. And I'm thrilled that you were here with us today. So I hate to end it. I feel like I could keep talking, but we maybe we'll continue it some other time. When I'm back in New York, when we can travel again, I'd love to meet you in person. So I haven't met you in person yet, so that would be fun.
Can I just say one thing?
Sure.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, because there are 10 million things that you could be doing. And I just really appreciate that you're here with me right now. It just feels really great. And I really hope that you I love beauty and love it as much as I do. I really hope so. I guess this is one of them. I studied with Michael Cunningham, and one of the things he instilled in us was, people could be doing anything, including having sex. But no, they're reading your book. So, have some kind of respect, like honor that. And I really feel like that's so true, like with people's time, especially now. There's always so much going on. And I feel really lucky that you all came out, and it feels really great, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
I'm unmuting everyone so we can all clap and say,
Yeah, Christina.
great work, and thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.